Happy weekend to you. This is Saturday, September 7th. As I record this for your date and timestamp, I wanted to wait for the weekend on this so that I could lead or begin with talking about NIO Stock, the trade volume, the FTDs, and what we've seen recently. The last couple of days, NIO had their earnings before the market opened on Thursday of this week. Thursday and Friday, both days, NIO had over 100 million shares traded both of those days, and we saw big moves up with the stock price over those couple of days. So with that in mind, I want to briefly talk about the ticker at the bottom of the screen because I've been highlighting and kind of watching this the last few weeks with this in mind: short-term stock price action. The indicators that I watch, the first one is the trade volume. And in fact, now I'm going to go back and show you the full history of NIO Stock with the fails to deliver on screen, make a couple of points in case you're not aware of it or haven't seen my previous content where I've talked about this. And what we've got are a couple things. If we look back over the course of the full history, the yellow on this chart represents the price action for NIO Stock. This is a time frame where NIO Stock had very big trade volume, sort of on the daily average. I remember seeing 80 to 100 million shares traded on average every day during these months when the stock price soared. Also at that same time, the fails to deliver, represented by the white lines, had fallen off for NIO. Now, I didn't pick up on this until after the fact, but that was back then. And now I have more awareness, more understanding. I've done hundreds of hours of research. And so this is something I'll be tracking moving forward so that if, for example, we do see NIO Stock start a short squeeze, we will have more awareness and be able to be more attentive to what's happening, perhaps while it's happening. Now, I am a long-term viewed investor with NIO Stock. This is not a short-term or short squeeze play for me, but I also want to have that awareness if it is happening and track it and share what I'm seeing and finding along the way. Now, the fails to deliver data, this is when naked shorting could be going on with the stock, and there could be suppression of the stock price, which is why I think there's a correlation, and it's maybe more clear and easy to see with NIO Stock than some other companies and their stocks. But in this case, you've got the yellow almost constantly down, very low. The price action, very, very minimal versus the high FTDs, the spiking of the white lines. And then when there's a big drop off, and this is really the only time frame that we saw the fails to deliver drop off for NIO, the stock ran. And in fact, the 6-month kind of window that I captured looking back over time, we had NIO Stock run from in a 6-month time frame from about $3.50 to $55. So that's how fast it can move up. Now, conversely, in the 3-year kind of downtrend that it's been in, it has taken, the way I say it is, it's taken shorts about 3 years to take the stock price from $45 down to sub $4. And now just in a couple of days with elevated fails to deliver that I had talked about recently, this is what's noteworthy for me: the 5 million and the 6 million spikes on an individual day. We hadn't seen that level of spiking with the FTDs since all the way back to about January of 2020. And as you'll note from the way everything trends, a few months later, we saw that big move. And so I don't know, I'm not calling for a short squeeze, but I do want to have this attention and kind of be watching things like, for example, if we keep having this big daily trade volume, that could be shorts that are having to buy. It could be investors who are buying, and that buying pressure could lead to more buying pressure. And so let's just see what happens. All right. But that's kind of the short-term view. Sentiment also could shift, not just for NIO, but for Chinese stocks. So that's another thing I've kind of got in the back of my mind. And again, that's why I wanted to lead and start with the 3 things on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Now let's get into kind of my first take. And there are 5 things that I've chosen from the earnings, the transcript from that. Let's just jump right into it. This is, and there are 2 pieces of this that I want to highlight kind of together, and then I'll show you what I'm thinking with this. NIO's delivery in Q2 reached a quarterly record of 57,373 units. That's up 143.9%. As per William Lee in his comments, he says NIO models had over 40% market share among all BEVs with a transaction price higher than RMB $300,000. So for me, I'm thinking, okay, that's, let's say, give or take, estimation wise, $40,000 and above. BEVs, which is battery electric vehicles, NIO had over 40% of that market share. All right. 2 things that I'd like to highlight. The first is this: This is in the first half of the year, and this is the breakdown. NIO, with its premium brand, has 8 models that it sells at this time: the ES6, the EC6, the ET5 Touring, the ET5, the ET7, the ES7, the ES8, and the EC7. Every one of these 8 models is ranking in the top 10 for their respective price ranges. However, this only represents a small piece of the overall market in China, so there's still a lot of share to be taken. More on that in just a second. Let's come back to the comments now. And William Lee, he says the NIO brand has been realizing a pretty stable market share in the premium segment for years. This is mainly because we have a diversified and rich product portfolio to offer for the premium segment. We have, and then he lists the models that I just shared. Obviously, they're all in demand because they're all in the top 10 for their respective price ranges, right? But that's only the BEV sales. He says, so it's a pretty wide range of a product offering that will be enough to cover many product segments. Then he goes on to say, and many of these products are also leading the sales volume in the respective BEV product segment. Not to mention that for some niche products like ET5 Touring, EC7, EC6 in their respective segment, their volume is even higher than some of the ICE competitors. All right, that's the gas vehicle sellers. So overall speaking, we have made a quite successful product portfolio and offering strategy. Plus, we also have other advantages such as charging and the swapping network, leading technologies, good product experience, service, and user community. This has further enhanced and solidified our foothold in the premium EV segment. In the meantime, we also hope, and I love this, folks, I love hearing this from him. In the meantime, we also hope that more players can also come into this segment so that we can work with them together to enlarge the size of this premium segment, the premium EV segment. In the meantime, for the entire NIO company, we actually have a pretty clear and straightforward strategy for the continuous business growth. The first is by a wider price range. And this is where I think we're going to see NIO step into and shift into profitability, I think in the next year or two. More on that in a bit, probably. But let me get back to his comments from next year. Talk about 2025. We are going to have 3 brands in the market. With that, our price range, the price range that can be covered by these 3 brands will be as wide or pretty wide, ranging from RMB 140,000 all the way to RMB 800,000. And with battery as a service, the price range will be from RMB 100,000 to RMB 700,000, which will be a very strong competition to the ICE, the gas costs in the respective segments. With 3 brands with the wide price range, we will be able to reach a broader market than many of our other competitors. I could not agree more. I love the fact that he sees that leveraging partnerships can take them further. And this is big picture thinking, but this is the way the guy operates. This is one of my favorite things about him. Mr. EQ is what I nicknamed him because he sees things when others maybe can't or don't. So now let's talk about why there's still a long way for not just NIO, but any other competitors who want to move into, as he said, people or partners potentially who move into this premium space and segment. This is all passenger vehicle models and the retail volume rankings by price for that 300,000 RMB range and above, right? This is for the first half of the year. Now you see a few NIO vehicles. Now the EV or the BEV battery electric vehicles, the pure battery electric vehicles are represented in green, and you don't see a lot of green on this one, right? But if we come back to the other, which is all BEVs, let's just take a brief look. The ES6, for example, for NIO, with almost 40,000, according to these numbers, at the number 2 spot, that's for BEVs. But then if we move back over here, they were number 10 overall. There are a lot of ICE sales represented by the blue still going to the companies like Mercedes, BMW, and Audi. Now in China, eventually these will all be NEV, new energy vehicle sales. So you may see some hybrids take them, as we're seeing, or the PHEVs, the orange depicting that, but you're going to see a lot more green. And NIO is the early mover in that premium space. Now they're finally broadening out to where they're going to be expanding and selling in a lot wider price range, as he cited in the call with those comments. So now let's move on to the next point. This is kind of what I'm thinking with respect to profitability. I think the L60, the first sub-brand for NIO, this is the first model they've got coming out. It's the L60. I think this is going to probably be the driver for NIO to profitability. At least it's the easiest to see. I'll put it that way. I think it's the easiest kind of map for folks like analysts who are going to be maybe a little more short-sighted. That's a generalization. It's an unfair stereotype. I'll accept that. Um, but it's also not necessarily untrue, in part because of the way they look at things. And they're not going to see things like the big curve coming back, with an IDE company, an innovative driven enterprise. And I'm sorry, I meant to pull that up and share that chart, but I'll do it in a future video. This is already going to be a lengthy video, so let me keep it moving. The point being, for IDEs versus SMEs, IDEs are essentially larger footprint companies. It could be a global company, and they take a little longer to get to profitability versus an SME, a small, medium enterprise, a smaller business that can hit profitability sooner, but has kind of a cap to the upside on what it can make. A true IDE company like NIO, I think, has a much, much bigger potential profit footprint that it can take, especially over the course of time, but it does need time. So with that, coming back to the L60, these are the comments from William Lee. Regarding L60, when its overall production volume reaches a reasonable and expected target, we believe that it will naturally realize a 15% vehicle margin. Of course, against the fierce competition, we have also reserved some room for the variable marketing of the product so that we will be more flexible in the competition. Yet overall speaking, as the product itself is designed for efficiency and cost, 15% vehicle margin is a reasonable target for this model, as we actually managed to realize a good balance between the technology advancement and the cost competitiveness. Regarding the capacity preparation, we are having the mid and long-term planning for our production capacity in 2025 and 2026. As of now, we already have 2 factories in operation. Factory 2, or F2, has already started to upgrade to double shifts to support the production of L60. In late September or early October, the upgrade to 2 shifts will be completed in Factory 2. And in the meantime, we are also planning our 3rd factory. And around Q3 next year, the 3rd factory will be ready to produce the products, which means that by Q3 next year, we will have 3 factories in operations, and it should be sufficient to support our production. Now, and I didn't highlight the numbers that he gave, but he was asked about this. He essentially said the ramp initially for L60 and Onvo is going to be slow. Later, and that is this year of 2024, but in the year of 2025, he's hoping they can get to and ramp it to where it's delivering 20,000 a month. So let's just see. That's something for us to watch moving forward. But I do think with strong margins and with the stabilization, especially if we continue to see 20,000 as kind of the baseline for the NIO with the premium deliveries. And as I showed earlier, I hope everyone can see there's a lot more market share to go in that premium segment. So NIO can continue to grow those deliveries. He talked about that as well. Long-term, 30 to 40,000 kind of being the target range for the NIO brand with the deliveries on the monthly side of things. So again, there's going to be some scaling, some delivering of both Onvo and NIO. I like that he's keeping things conservative, short-term, and let's just see how the launch goes and how the numbers materialize over time. Now, this is with respect to broader expansion, and especially in my mind, I'm really wondering and watching how the ET9 being released and launched, and then also how that aligns with the UAE. Of course, the investors from CYVN, Abu Dhabi, put a lot of money into NIO, and I think that's a really nice strategic partnership, especially right now with some global uncertainties around things like tariffs. But now let's talk about the tariffs. This is his response to a question about that. Because of the tariffs in Europe, now selling or exporting costs from China to Europe becomes more expensive. So we will focus on the existing 5 European markets that we have already started. We also know that to establish NIO, such a premium brand in the European market, will also take a longer time, and we are very patient with that. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean that we have stopped our activities there. I'm going to hit pause. There's one thing, and we're going to talk about this later with autonomous driving, but regulation matters when you're going outside of your home country or region. In the case of the US, this is one of the big hurdles that I've talked about, whether we're talking autonomous driving or building out things like power swap stations. There are layers of regulations to get through. It's not as simple as or straightforward as, for example, in China, they just kind of lay things out. This is the law, this is the direction, and that's what they do. From a business mentality and approach, in some ways that's easier to navigate. So I wasn't shocked when we saw some areas of Europe slower with the build out of power swap stations for those reasons, for example, because it does take a while to get through all that, the legality, the regulations, kind of that red tape. So Now back to the comments. He says, earlier this year, we have just opened our NIO house in Amsterdam, and we are still installing and deploying our power swap stations in Europe. So we will keep the same plan. In terms of the market entry into UAE, as you may know, that last year we have received a US dollar 3 billion strategic investment from the Abu Dhabi government, and then the market entry into UAE is part of the plan. And one of the things I'm really curious about is not just how the vehicles, like the high-end vehicles, the ET9, for example, will sell there, but also I think there's a really, really nice under the radar play with the power swap stations with the photovoltaic panels on top, solar panels in the Middle East makes a lot of sense. And so if NIO can really prove out the value of the stabilization of not just the grid, but the ability to really operate with new power options energy wise, I think that's huge. And I think that could really take off. So Middle East will be in my mind with respect to that. I'll be watching that moving forward. But now back to his comments. And sorry, I'm just going with this one. I knew it would be a long video, but I wanted to get through at least 5 kind of key points as I thought folks might be interested to hear what I was seeing and thinking with respect to that. So with that, he says, we will work with our strategic partners in UAE to offer our products and services to the local market. Starting next year, a big difference is that we not only have NIO branded products, but also products from Onvo and Firefly, the sub-brands, which are more suitable for the global market. So this really gives them flexibility globally, not just in China, but outside of China, thinking about different markets and targeting things in different ways. With that, he says, we will be actually more active with our international expansion. But in the meantime, we will also need to keep a good balance between our investment scale and the efficiency to make sure that we enter into the global market in a smarter and more efficient way. As an investor, that's exactly what I want to hear. I mentioned the other day on a video that one of the first things I watch, because NIO is not yet profitable, is the balance sheet. And so I'm always kind of checking that every quarter. That's one of the first things I look at, because I want to make sure that they are maintaining control over things. And in the case of the strategic partnerships that they have got, I really like the creative leveraging of those partnerships that William Li has done, so they don't have to do conventional or traditional at the market offerings, because that's where the short thesis can really do damage to a company. But probably more on that in another video. So let me get back and let's highlight this now. Overall speaking, and this is where this is fun. If you stuck around to this point, you deserve what you're going to see. It's going to be, well, this is why I think NIO is way ahead, but a lot of folks have not seen it or recognized it yet. So congrats for sticking around to this point. William Li says, overall speaking, we believe that we are still leading the block in terms of the smart driving technologies. We have already tested the latest functionality on NAD Arch 2.0 at the small scale, and its performance is pretty impressive. Overall speaking, with the work model and end-to-end architecture, we will be able to realize quicker functionality, iteration, better experience at a lower cost. In terms of the Onvo brand, its product will come with a single range with pure vision technology solution. All right, let me hit pause on this. This is a YouTube video, and if you haven't seen it, I will link it in the description. This is from NIO Edition. Shout out for this video. And I paused it right here because I'm not going to show you the video. I'll link it so you can check it out for yourselves. This is a almost 4-minute video, and there is no one in the driver's seat. This is a NIO vehicle taking itself to a battery swap station and swapping the battery autonomously with no one then in the driver's seat. There is no other company doing this. There's no other company that has this. NIO is way ahead. This is from 3 months ago, by the way. And this is the point at which I stopped in the video, because not only can you see the cool lighting inside the interior of the NIO, but you see it's navigating with another car here. But it's very clear throughout this video, there is no driver in the seat. The vehicle does take itself to the swap station, swaps the battery out, and leaves on its own. This is the kind of thing that other people have been promising and talking about and not delivering on. And this is one reason, actually, now we're going to dig into kind of the nerdy part of it. This is one of the reasons it takes me so long to get through things sometimes when I'm researching. This is from the most recent SEC filing from NIO. They do these annually, and this is page 98 if you look this way. It's page 95 if you look this way. This is the regulations on autonomous driving, and this is from China. Remember earlier I referenced how in China there's the law, and they just kind of roll it out and say this is the direction we're going. So this is back in referenced as on July 21st or 27th, 2021. The Ministry of Public Security and the Ministry of Transport issued Administration of Road Testing and Demonstration Application of Intelligent Connected Vehicles Trial Implementation, or the circular number 97, which took effect on September 1st, 2021. And we go on, it's legalese, right? This is the legal regulation, kind of the breakdown, but this is the reference point. Okay, now this is the more recent post, the tweet from ThinkerCar. The Ministry of Public Security announced that the unmanned and autonomous vehicle industry in China is progressing orderly. Public security agencies have issued 16,000 testing license plates and opened 32,000 kilometers of public testing roads, supporting the verification and updates of autonomous driving technology. Now, one of the companies that is leading and has a lot of robotaxis on the roads is Baidu. Baidu partnered with Momenta. And if you're not familiar, this is the VP of NIO's autonomous driving. And he was hired, well, he was basically a co-founder at Momenta. He helped build everything out that they're now using in the Apollo network between Momenta and Baidu. So NIO is very well positioned in this respect. So now I want to come back to the comments, and hopefully you'll see that William Li is not bragging here. He's just stating facts, but a lot of people still do not recognize the fact that NIO might be a leader already in the autonomous space. But William Li is also outspoken and kind of acknowledged that he's not trying to say NIO should be robotaxi. That's not at all the way he's trying to market or, look at laying out the brand and what it can do. And he's certainly not trying to monetize the stock price off of claiming that they're going to have robotaxi. But it's interesting, isn't it, that NIO already is better positioned to potentially offer robotaxi. So with that in mind, let's come back to his comments. Overall speaking, we believe that we are still leading the block in terms of the smart driving technologies. Even the way he presents things, he's not going to say robotaxi. He's just not going to put that out there. But he's talking about NAD, that's NIO Autonomous Driving, Arch 2.0. And I believe the reference was for later in this year of 2024, or maybe it's 2025. I can't remember on that. And I'm sorry, I'm off script now. I don't have my tabs lined up. But I just think this is something to watch, not just with NIO, but with Onvo. Let's see how good Onvo is with its autonomous driving features, with its, as he puts it, the smart driving technologies. Let's just wait and watch and see how good they are. But these are just some of the things that I was looking at. I haven't even worked my way all the way through everything yet. But these are sort of the first 5 that hit me. I wanted to get something out over the weekend, and I also wanted to wait so that we could kind of, I wanted to see what volume and price ended up looking like for NIO. 100 million shares traded on both Thursday, Friday, with an obvious, at least very short-term uptrend. Let's see what happens moving forward. If we continue to see the kinds of things that we saw back in this time frame, one thing that's nice is I'll be a lot more aware of it and able to kind of watch things. Now, for the FTD updates, FTDs, fails to deliver, always delayed their lagged data. But last Friday, it was, I think, the last, maybe August 30th or 31st. It was one of the last days of August is when I pay to get access to this data, but they reported the delayed lagged data from August 1st through the 13th. And one of the things that I saw is we had these elevated spikes still in play back-to-back days with about 2.5 and almost 3 million on those 2 respective days. And I did a video about that over the weekend because I recognized that Fintel was not sharing that data. So with this kind of cadence from this chart exchange where I get my data, I'm hoping we'll get to see where the fails to deliver were in the next 2 to 4 weeks to be conservative. But as soon as I get it, especially if or when I see that Fintel or someone else isn't reporting what I can see, I'll do another video on it. So I guess what I'll say is this: come back and see me again, because I'll have to do more content. There's a lot more. I'm so far behind. And that's the great thing. I picked a company. I call NIO a unicorn very intentionally. We've never seen a company like this. I love the fact that this is a business that can make it to profitability. It doesn't need government help, support to get there. It can do it on the merits of the strength of the underlying business model. They're doing things that people still aren't recognizing. If you go back in time, and this is kind of the funny thing about IDEs, innovative driven enterprises, there's a point in time when streaming was new and people were like, oh, that's never going to go anywhere. Or I remember a time when people were talking about Amazon, how that would never be a viable business. And of course, I was gone from the world for over 7 years, came back, and there are all these Amazon trucks all over the place. And I'm like, whoa, what happened here? It's just interesting, but that's part of it. And I call it learning agility for the CEO, a founder of a company like William Lee, to have the level of EQ and IQ that he has. He's probably the one piece of the company that I'm the most bullish on. The way that he's willing to leverage and able to leverage partnerships and see beyond. And I think the level of altruism that he presents and brings actually will bring in more profits for the company over the course of the long haul, big picture overview. And that is why I chose this company to talk about and kind of nerd out on and share some of my research. The three growth phases I've also got at the bottom of the screen above the ticker, and that's what I'm watching. And so for me, I'm just going to keep tracking things until we get at least 1 million NIO sales. That's the premium deliveries cumulatively out. We're probably a couple years away from that, but that's great. That gives Firefly the newest sub-brand that's going to be out soon, probably in 2025. And then Onvo, the other sub-brand that is just going to start deliveries in this month of September. A chance. It's still early, but it's exciting times. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. I'll see you all again very soon.